everybody, this is my thoughts on the open beta for Doom 4. I refuse to call it Doom because that would imply that it's the original Doom, which it is not. It's a reboot because, of course, they had to reboot the series and they couldn't just say Doom enter subtitle here, or they couldn't just say Doom 4. Nope. Gotta reboot the series, gotta name it just plain old Doom, thus confusing it with the original from 1993, which is still one of the best games ever made and holds up to this day. This, on the other hand, at least in the multiplayer side of things, is a complete friggin' disaster. Now, to give you some context, I've been playing Doom regularly for the past about 22 years. It is one of my favorite games of all time, and it is still one of the best games ever made. Doom 2 is basically more of the same, but very slightly better. And then Doom 3 happened, and it was a fundamental misunderstanding of what Doom originally was supposed to be. When they first showed off this particular iteration of Doom, they tried to make it look like the originals to some degree. And by the originals, I don't mean the actual originals, I mean mods for the originals, namely Brutal Doom, which, I mean, it's a good mod, don't get me wrong, but it's not really Doom. It's more of a modernized take on Doom. And if they had just aped all of that, then it probably would have been fine, except they didn't ape that. Instead, what we have here is basically an amalgamation of Call of Duty, Halo, and Unreal Tournament of all things, with the Doom aesthetic slapped onto it. I'll get to that more in a moment, but before I get there, I do have to address something with regards to the presentation. You will be noticing a lot of stuttering in this video. That is not a result of the recording software. The game actually runs like that, and I have absolutely no idea what's causing it, because we can't actually mess with the graphics settings in the beta. The only thing we can really mess with is resolution and what type of anti-aliasing it uses. We actually cannot turn anti-aliasing off at all. Nor can we even turn off mouse acceleration, which gets rather annoying in the menus, and I have noticed it a bit in the multiplayer as well, getting in my way. You know what that means? That means that this particular iteration of Doom is not a PC game. It's a console port. I'm going to let that sink in for a moment. The fact that Doom, a flagship PC first-person shooter series, is a console port now. It is ludicrously depressing to see that happen. And more importantly, it is ludicrously depressing that we actually can't mess around with the graphics settings and actually make this thing run somewhat acceptably. Instead, it says it's running at 60 FPS, but it's not really running at 60 FPS. There's a ton of micro-stuttering, and there's a ton of frame rate hitching that doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason to it. Your mileage may vary on the performance issues, but think about it this way. I'm running an i7 4790K, 16 gigs of RAM, and a GTX 970. This thing should run just fine. In fact, this is above the recommended specs for this thing. The GTX 970 is at recommended spec, but my processor and my RAM are both above it. It should run just fine, and yet it runs like complete crap. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, once you get past that, there are some things in this that definitely look like Doom. I mean, the Revenant is definitely looking like Doom. You have that sort of techno hell aesthetic going on that is definitely Doom. But then once you look beyond the actual aesthetic, you end up finding all sorts of holes. Namely things like the texture quality being pretty awful in a lot of spots, or the fact that you can make your character so damn shiny, or the fact that you just don't look like a Doom Marine anymore. They threw in a character customization system, and you end up looking more like friggin' Spartans from the Halo series than you do actual Doom Marines. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, it could of course just be that we don't have all the bells and whistles enabled for this particular beta, but if it is that case, then the full version better look a lot better than this, because if it doesn't, then it is not justifying its absolutely piss-poor performance. Beyond that, the music, if you can call it that, is incredibly obnoxious. It's basically just noise and nothing else. I can't really describe it as anything else because that's literally all it is. It's noise. Where's the heavy metal? I'm asking this because as poor of a Doom game as Doom 3 was, at least they had heavy metal in that on the main menu. They understood they had to at least include a bit of heavy metal to make it true to the originals. This one doesn't even try. And then once you get past that, you end up with some bizarre crap in the sound design. While the Revenant itself sounds pretty good, actually, The explosions sound incredibly wimpy. The super shotgun, which should sound like a friggin' cannon, sounds pretty wimpy actually, and that makes sense once you actually figure out how much damage it does. But once you get past that, you find that really none of the weapons actually sound very good. They're never actually beefy. They don't have that really nice concussive force that you would get in other games. Again, I find it odd comparing this to Doom 3 and finding Doom 3 superior in this regard, but even the super shotgun in Doom 3 actually sounded fairly powerful. It wasn't amazing, but it sounded somewhat powerful. And hell, even when you got to things like the plasma gun, it sounded actually pretty beefy. And then you get to this, and the plasma gun sounds wimpy because it is wimpy. You've got the heavy assault rifle, which sounds like a pretty generic machine gun, where even the chain gun and even the friggin' normal machine gun in Doom 3 actually sounded better than this. You've got a rocket launcher that should sound awesome, but actually ends up sounding so weak it could probably be misconstrued as flatulence. And then you've got a multitude of energy weapons that sound like generic pew-pew lasers. It's pathetic. But then there's the weird bit with regards to voice acting, namely the fact that there isn't any beyond the actual announcer, and the announcer sounds way too pleasant for a Doom game. Doom announcer should sound pretty badass, but when you get to this, it's just 5 minutes remain, and such like that. And beyond that, the Marines don't even scream when they die. They don't grunt, they don't scream, nothing. They make no noise whatsoever. It's like you're playing a bunch of robots. But if it were just the presentation that were wimpy and the gameplay was actually good, then it would be fine, I would be able to put up with it. But when you actually get to the gameplay, this is one of the worst multiplayer experiences I have had in years. I'm not entirely sure where they got the idea that this would actually be acceptable for a Doom game, but what they ended up making here is a bizarre amalgamation of mostly Halo, actually, mixed in with the Doom aesthetic, a few elements from Unreal Tournament, of all things, and the Call of Duty style level progression system. If you haven't seen my short teaser on this particular MTO as well as the announcement of when the Fallout 4 review was going up, then let me fill you in. The first thing I noticed and reacted to in this particular beta was the fact that this game has loadouts. A 2-weapon limit with loadouts. Right there, they have instantly failed their mandate. They were trying to make this a sort of arena shooter, and they have failed miserably. Congratulations, id Software and Certain Affinity, you do not understand what an arena shooter is. In an arena shooter, every single person starts on the same footing. It is all about map control and skill. Arena shooters take place at a breakneck speed with incredible amounts of precision and timing required. You need to understand when to do bunny hopping, when to do rocket jumping, if a plasma climb will even help you at all. I've never actually seen it used at all in my entire time playing Quake 3, but people insist to me that this is a skill you need to know, and thus I decide to include it here because they'll bitch at me otherwise. But you get the idea. There are numerous skills you need to learn in order to actually succeed at an arena shooter. And this has been the case since the beginning. Since the early days of Doom and Quake, you have needed to understand the maps, you have needed to understand how fast you move, you've needed to understand how to basically stop on a dime and move properly within the world, as well as being able to hit things with incredible amounts of precision and speed. Because otherwise, in a proper arena shooter, everyone starts on the same footing. You all have the exact same weapons, and you all have the exact same amount of health. It all comes down to how well you can control the map, how well you can find all the pickups, how well you can find the weapons that you need to be able to succeed, and how well you use those weapons. Doom 4 does not adhere to the tenets of an arena shooter. Instead, it acts like it's an arena shooter, when in fact the only pickups in the map are health, armor, and ammo, as well as the Gauss Cannon, which gives you 4 insta-gib shots, and the Demon Rune pickup, which gives you, basically as long as you can survive, free kills. Thus, Doom 4 is not about map control and skill so much as it's about controlling the Demon Rune. This is particularly noteworthy because Doom 4, while faster than most modern FPSs, is not fast enough to be an arena shooter. People will be like, oh, it's actually pretty fast to me. Yeah, because you've been used to console shooters for a very long time at this point. They are far slower than arena shooters simply because the arena shooter requires the precision and speed of keyboard and mouse. A gamepad does not have that precision and speed, and it becomes painfully obvious when you play this thing that it was designed around a gamepad and not around keyboard and mouse. Again, while it is faster than most modern FPSs, it's not fast enough. To give you a prime example, dodging projectiles is actually a pretty big thing in arena FPSs, and in this, you can't dodge projectiles. In fact, the only projectile that you see really anyone using is the rocket launcher, and that's only because it does some splash damage. But here's the thing. Because the movement is so slow, it's actually incredibly easy to get direct hits with it, because unlike in, say, the older school Dooms or in Quake or something like that, you can't just jump out of the way of the rocket. It just is going to hit you no matter what you try to do. And as I mentioned before, you can't rocket jump in this game at all. You can't plasma climb. You can't even really bunny hop very well because you have the double jump thing going on, which is basically ripped directly from Unreal Tournament for some reason. So momentum is really no longer a thing, and it really just becomes a matter of just running around on the ground, occasionally jumping to get to a higher location, thus making use of the climbing mechanic ripped directly from Crysis, because of course they have to pull something from that as well, and generally just getting into a loop of running up to someone, blasting them with the super shotgun 3 or 4 times, because that's actually how many shots it generally takes to kill someone with that thing. I'm not joking when I say you basically have to shove that thing up someone's ass in order to actually be able to get a 2-shot kill. Not a 1-shot kill, a 2-shot kill with the super shotgun. And that's to say nothing of the fact that a direct hit with the rocket launcher only does 55 damage, and the splash damage barely even scratches them. In fact, the only weapon I have seen do reliable damage other than the Gauss cannon, which basically insta-gibs you, if you're using the Vortex rifle, which is basically like if you took the lightning gun from Unreal Tournament 2003 and 2004 and threw it into Doom for some reason, then you can reliably get about 80 damage out of it, so you might as well use that all the time because it doesn't take long to charge up and it's pretty easy to hit someone with it because they're not going to be able to dodge it. But even that doesn't reliably get one-shot kills. The only thing that reliably gets one-shot kills is the Gauss cannon thus far. They don't have the BFG in here yet. And of course, the Revenant is ludicrously overpowered. It's incredibly easy to get kills with it, and if you're decent with it, then you're probably never going to actually die. Other than that, you might be able to get the quad damage pickup to actually make your weapons do a fairly decent amount of damage, but other than that, they're going to just feel incredibly wimpy. Sure, the effects are nice when you manage to basically vaporize someone with the shotgun or the rocket launcher, but it took you about 4 or 5 shots to get there. That's not to say that the rocket launcher was super powerful in Quake or anything, but it did a lot more damage than 55 on a direct hit. In fact, in Quake 3, if you hit someone with a rocket and it was a direct hit, chances are they were going to die unless they had full armor. In this, you can survive 2 hits to the face with a rocket launcher without wearing any armor at all. It's pathetic. And then there's the simple fact that all of the other weapons are effectively worthless, so you're only going to stick with the super shotgun, the vortex rifle, and the rocket launcher because they're the only ones that actually seem to work. I have only once died to a plasma gun, and it was because I had already been reduced to about 5 hit points. So the weapon damage is completely off-kilter, and the actual movement speed is too slow to compensate for the projectiles that they have. And the lack of pickups on the map other than health, armor, and ammo is incredibly wimpy. It means that the maps are no longer about map control or map knowledge, it's just about getting close to the enemy so you can wipe them out. It's about incredibly spammy combat that is complete chaos. And then to add insult to injury, they throw in a leveling system where you can level up and get access to more customization options for your armor and your weapons, although those are all purely cosmetic, as well as things like the various taunts you can do if you're one of the top 3 players at the end of the round. You can play an emote to where you'll dance, or you'll throw up devil horns, or any number of things like that, because that's clearly what we really wanted, right? Never mind the fact that certain weapons are actually blocked off to certain levels, so if you wanted to use them, well, too bad, you have to level up to be able to use them. And while I haven't gotten to that level yet, I really don't give a crap, honestly. The core gameplay is just such an amalgam of modern FPSs with a couple of throwbacks to older school FPSs that they just fail miserably at making anything cohesive. All the while, they are basically saying, hey, we're bringing the arena shooter back, and they just don't understand what an arena shooter is. And to make matters worse, they even throw in something called hack modules, which give you straight up advantages on spawn. Things like finding out how long it's going to take to respawn a certain pickup item, or finding out where an enemy was because you can see them through a wall and such like that. It's honestly insulting. And then you combine that with the fact that this runs on matchmaking and the servers are terrible. There's lag up the wazoo regardless of your connection. It's pretty ridiculous, actually. And what you end up with is a game that is just not fun. And the Steam reviews actually reflect that pretty well. The Steam reviews for the open beta, at least, are at 36% positive. And a good chunk of the positive reviews are actually just people making fun of it, so I guess it's good to know that I'm not alone in this. It's a terrible multiplayer experience. Maybe the single player will be better, but the multiplayer does not understand what an arena shooter is. It runs like crap, it lags, it plays like crap, and it's really just like the developers threw a bunch of different games into a blender and hit the puree button, not even giving a crap what actually came out. Apparently, according to them, Doom is really all about blood and gore, obnoxious noise for music, weapons that don't feel very good to use, and more importantly than that, completely avoiding what actually made Doom great in the first place. Like I said, this looks like it could be Doom at first glance, but the more you really look into it, it's nowhere near Doom. This is just a bunch of modern FPSs slapped together to make something so painfully generic that it ends up being boring when it isn't outright infuriating. Here's hoping the single player is better than this, because admittedly I never really played Doom for the multiplayer to begin with, but the multiplayer in this is just painfully terrible. Thanks for watching.